right, everybody. Here's our homie Federico Ferrendina. Did I pronounce that kind of
Yeah,
okay?
that's quite perfect.
You
You
know
did a
what?
good job.
I'm pretty Italian. I can do this whole thing. I went
Not
to see. I'm basically Italian. I went to Italy once. Learned this. You
really.
know.
You do that?
Oh wait, shit. That. God.
That's yeah. That at some point of their view, you're gonna do that. I'm
Ah,
sure.
not that. It's that. Okay.
Yeah.
Apparently, I'm not very Italian. Whatever. All good. Weird part of Italy. You haven't been there. Anyways. So you got a placement. You absolutely actually got three placements with us this month, which was crazy.
I'm a lucky
Uh,
guy.
no, I mean the songs deserved it. It was crazy, man. So you got a placement for three songs. One was Bosporus, one was Konya, and the other was the Nile Talks
Right.
for TP 120. I think it was TP 123.
Yeah.
Yep. So World Music. The buyer kept freaking out about how authentic everything sounded. So awesome. I think the final payment we paid out to use 1,050. Just absolutely slayed it, man. So when I first listened to these songs, I was just crazy impressed by everything. So really, man, like I just feel like the songs you're writing and what you're doing, you're basically just kind of an expert in this realm. So I want to talk about your story, how you started in music, everything, just kind of about your upbringing in music, because these were three very authentic tracks in different sub styles, and you slayed it on each. So yeah, man, like how'd you get started in music? Firstly, where are you from? All this stuff. We talked about Italy.
Okay. Thanks.
Italy.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Mark, and thank you, that pitch for the services you offer us, guys. You're
Oh,
doing
dude.
great. So, of course, I'm Italian, as you, as someone already understood. Yeah, I'm 100% Italian, Southern. Uh, uh, I I was born basically. I was born in a family of classical musicians. From my mom's side, my mom was a piano player. My grandmother, she was a violin player in orchestras. My great grandfather, he was a conductor of military band and woodwind instruments expert. So I mean, I have this huge heritage on me. And But I've always been attracted by other musical galaxies since I was a kid. I mean, when I first listened to the Beatles when I was 10 years old, I was already playing piano at home because my mom taught me piano. But when I listened to the Beatles, when I was 10, I freaked out. I switched to guitar, starting going crazy about rock and roll, started learning blues guitar, all that stuff, started playing in bands since I was literally like 12 years old. I had my first band.
Wow, that's dope.
Yeah. Started recording albums, concerts at 13, and like gigs, paid gigs, and
Oh, wow.
recording albums at 16 something. So, and then I also studied in conservative. I mean, it was a parallel adventure. The Let's call it the pop rock adventure, which at some point also involved jazz and other musical expressions
Mhm.
and the classical music adventure. So I always felt that I'm a very Western musician, even if in this particular case with that pitch, my uh, my business, my job was to do something Eastern or at least Middle Eastern. Um, so I started producing music when I was 21st, I think 21 years old,
Okay.
and but it was, I mean, it was a long time ago, and
Not a day over 25. Okay.
so in that moment, I just produced the old way. I used to produce like writing arrangements, writing really pencil and paper on sheet music,
Yeah.
and so that was the way back in the day. And it was the starting moment where we initially started using DAWs. So also in studios I started understanding what Pro Tools used to do, what Logic was, and stuff like that. So I got equipped with all that stuff, like some years later, and I started doing my own productions for other artists, my own music. Initially, I thought I would become a great singer-songwriter, which didn't happen. So, but what happened is that I understood the process of what being a singer-songwriter means. So I
Yeah.
started helping actually singer-songwriters, starting doing their productions, writing arrangements. And in the meantime, also the parallel path of the classical music also grew up. So I became like a classical trained composer and guitar player. So I started composing for orchestras and film music and all that other side of this industry. So I always have one foot in the singer-songwriter pop
Yeah.
music, the other foot in the more classical Western music. So at some point, coming back to where we are, at some point I had the chance to arrange some music for a Middle Eastern virtuoso multi-instrumentalist. It is a kind of star in the Middle Eastern music world. It's called Omar Farouk
Okay.
Tekbek. It's kind of famous in this field.
Yeah.
And so I had this wonderful experience, and I started actually working with him. I tour with him sometimes when he comes to Europe touring. I
Oh, that's
play
dope.
guitar with them
Okay.
in their shows. So I started really learning what the Middle Eastern galaxy was, and it's a big world. You know, there are a
Sure.
lot of differences between Turkish music and Egyptian music, etc. So when I first listened to the references that you guys at that pitch sent for this particular brief, I was happy about that because I had this experience already.
Mm.
So that's why I feel that I was anyway a little lucky
Oh,
to to be part of it in that precise moment. So and yes, that request was particularly focused on uh, Middle Eastern elements in
okay.
a cinematic track. I wouldn't go if you make it listen to a real Middle Eastern musician, it's gonna tell you, no, this is not Middle Eastern music.
Sure, sure, sure.
Of course, it's a blend, so we have to manage this blend wisely. So
Gotcha.
that's what
So,
I try to do in this track.
oh, I mean, you killed it. So, I mean, when you saw the brief, and I think we're going to be able to actually go into some of the sessions and like check out some of the songs, if you're cool with that.
Of
But you know, how, like, when you saw the brief and like you were analyzing it, how were you looking at it? Kind of, did you have a general idea of what direction you were going to go in? Were there any particular things that came to mind as soon as you read it and then you listened to the reference tracks? What was kind of like your first plan of action? Basically, how did you analyze the brief?
yeah, first of all, I asked myself if I had already something in
Sure.
my catalog because
So you have a big catalog already built out from
yeah, I
years.
have like
Perfect.
quite a big, not that big, but around 60 to 80 tracks. I never even counted them, but
Gotcha.
yeah,
So you're writing very regularly just to write, I would imagine, just like keeping everything in the back catalog, just building.
yeah, of course, because of course I write for a lot of different projects, either singer-songwriters or media or video games or stuff.
Sure.
And sometimes I get rejection, as
Yeah.
everyone else in this world.
Welcome to the music industry.
Yeah, but you know, rejected tracks are the best thing you can have because that's how you build your catalog. Because
Yep.
rejection doesn't mean it's not good. It means
Absolutely.
maybe it's not quite what that client wanted. So you learn a lot even with rejection. So I'm not
Absolutely.
afraid of getting rejection as I used to be.
Of course, of course.
So
At the start, you're like, holy shit, they said no. And you're just like, holy shit, they said yes. Like,
yeah, yeah. So initially, I already had one of these tracks in the. I didn't even finish one of the tracks that I submitted to that pitch for this brief, and it was not quite as it is now, the track, but I already had something going on in that style. So the first thing was going back to what I already had, and then listening to the references, listen to the keywords of that brief
yeah,
was crucial because something like um, driving, something like there was a word like about travel that was clearly
Yeah.
displayed that brief, that this had to some way suggest the feeling of traveling or having
Gotcha.
trip. So this really triggers something in my musical fantasy, in my musical
Sure.
imagination. So I went back to one of these track and I made it more close to this to one of the references. So the instruments, of course, another part of the an important part of this is choosing the right sounds, the right instruments,
Sure.
and understanding if I have already this in my arsenal of
Yeah.
instruments. So, of course, I mean, again, having this experience, direct experience with an artist in that field helped me a lot, even in choosing which reverb you have to use for that particular instrument,
Mm.
because I know the artist, how far does he stand from the microphone when he plays that particular wind instrument,
Oh,
for
wow.
example. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Like
So
how much room should there be?
yes, yeah, and that reverb is a crucial part of the sound of that instrument.
Well,
For
why?
example,
So why is that for example, like with this particular style?
basically, I'm thinking in particular about an instrument called zurna,
Okay.
which is a kind of oboe. It's a reed instrument. I
Oh
don't know if
yeah.
you're familiar with this kind of family of woodwinds.
Yep.
This is a reed instrument, and usually is so loud because all these instruments are not made to be played on a microphone. They are ancient instruments. They are made to be played acoustic.
To project. Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's really loud. It has a really heavy projection. So usually the sound engineer puts the microphone really far from the bell of this instrument.
Gotcha.
So this creates a very nice, and it creates a kind of mystical feeling to it,
Ah.
which is a whole part of the musical experience that you get when you listen to that artist. So this, for example, is something. And also another example I can make you is the timing. Sometimes the
Okay.
timing is not it's not always on the grid, even with the
Yeah.
instruments.
It's
But
kind
even
of like a yeah. Well, it's kind of like in neo solar jazz where it's like behind the beat or
yeah,
something. It's like
yeah,
understanding that
yeah,
feel.
that's the swing. It
Yeah.
has its own kind of swing. It's not like the African American jazz swing or the neo soul swing or the D'Angelo swing. It's a Middle Eastern swing, which is kind of different, but you can figure it out if I'm not Middle Eastern at all. But at some point during this experience, listening a lot to that music, of course, you understand the gist of that
Sure. Sure. So
rhythmical feeling. Yeah.
why don't we do this? Let's I'm just gonna go ahead and we'll play the 3 songs within this video. So
Okay.
anybody who wants to listen through, we'll just play either parts of the song or the full song. I don't really know what we're gonna put in, but let's put that in now so you can skim through, and then we'll come back and Federico will go through some of the session files explaining what his thought process was. So here's the songs. I'm back with Federico. Yo, let's dig into these sessions. So I don't know which one you got up.
We have open here. I have Bosporus.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Let's share the screen.
Okay,
If
I'll
you can
do the
do that.
screen sharing. This particular Bosporus is the name. You know what Bosporus is?
Yeah.
Right?
It's yeah. So wasn't it originally like it's in Istanbul?
Yes,
Yep.
it's in the middle of Istanbul. You have this. It's not a river. A river is a small
It's
portion
like
of the
yeah.
sea that divides the European part of
Yeah.
Istanbul from the um, how do you call it? From the
It's
southeastern part of Istanbul.
yeah. It's like a river that goes between what the Black Sea and.
Yes, exactly.
See, I know my geography, bro. I got geography B winner in 8th grade. Thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah. You're an educated. Yeah. So here's the session of this particular
Right.
song.
Yeah, and then I think you just press. Okay, cool. Yeah, sweet.
So not a lot of instruments going on, as you might see, and we already listened to this.
Yeah.
These first tracks here are all strings, like strings as you would have in a regular strings arrangement. These
Okay.
are like 8 stereo strings track. It's like the classical string quartet. We have the violin section, sorry, second violin, viola, and cellos, and all of them are doubled with a different patch because I usually, to make it feel more realistic, I usually double the ensemble patches with the solo instrument patch, just mix it really, really quiet, really softly compared to the ensemble patch, and it sounds a little more realistic. And I mean, it's just a standard mixing technique for when you don't have real strings. In this
Sure.
case, I didn't have the time, or I didn't have anything to record the real
Yeah.
string. I usually record. I'm used to record like real live strings
Oh,
play,
sure.
but
What
yeah.
what software did you use for the strings here?
This is LASS. You know
Okay,
this?
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it sounds pretty good. I've always used this once, and so I'm pretty comfortable with that from what I need. So, but whenever the strings are much more exposed than in a track like this, I would just go for the real strings player.
Perfect.
Just used to that. So in this. So as you might see, it
Oh,
sounds
that's
like,
dope.
yeah, I mean, the sound is a really Western strings instrument sound, but the phrasing is really Middle Eastern. Also, you have to play a lot with velocities and legato, portamento, all these parameters. I'm not
Mm.
going too much into these technical details, but
Oh, I love it.
yeah, there are ways to make it sound. For example, this little spot here to make it sound as Middle Eastern as
Sure.
possible,
Sure,
even
sure.
sample with the Western uh, samples. Um, these for the strings, as you might see, I didn't use double bass in this track because for this particular song, I chose to have a synth bass somewhere here. Okay,
Okay. So you
with
did incorporate some like more I guess I don't know, more pop related sounds, if that makes any
yeah, of
sense.
course. Yeah. In this for this song, I had to because the reference. I mean, the reference there were clearly
Mhm.
displayed some pop elements, or at least Western elements, or even dance elements.
Sure, sure. You know what? I actually just did an interview with one of our other placement winners, Chris Plansker, and we were talking about kind of matching authenticity with accessibility.
Yes.
And, what's your take on that, if that makes any sense? Because, like, what I was talking about with him is that, you have to figure out what's like the main bit and then what are you going to make accessible about it. To those who may not be familiar with the music, how are you going to relate it to what they may understand? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, there are things that I deliberately choose not to use. For example, quarter notes, which I
Okay,
usually use when I play with these guys. For example, I
sure.
didn't use that because Western ear is so not used to that they immediately gonna um, um, take it as a wrong note or an out of tune note.
Okay.
Our ear is not used to that. For example, this was one of the choices not to get too extreme there, and but yet the
Oh, so
whole
you're saying quarter tones.
quarter tones, yes.
Okay, cool. I first heard it as quarter note, and I was like, wait a
Oh,
second, we
sorry,
know what
sorry.
those are.
Yeah, quarter tones. I meant
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay,
with
cool.
an interval smaller than half step.
Yep.
So we're not used even to recognize that intervals. It just sounds out of tune for a non-educated ear to that particular interval.
Sure.
So I didn't use them at all. But what I use mostly to get the Middle Eastern feel. But we again we have a strings orchestra, which is such a Western thing, such a cinematic thing. But the beside of a very soft kick drum, all the percussions are used are kind of part of the Middle Eastern world, like darbuka, like some other frame drum
Oh,
instruments I used. I mean, here the darbuka makes a big.
yeah.
Uh,
Let's hear that. Yeah.
these are just, I mean, basically I used a couple of logic loops in a creative way. I never use loops as they are. I don't like this idea of using loops, putting
Sure.
loops. I always tweak them, as you might see. And also these are a couple of different darbuka patterns, one on top of the other, they're just stacked on each other. And they sound like slightly panned. Yeah.
Okay,
So
cool.
yeah. So the accents are really important for this uh, music. I mean, the choice of the accent where the darbuka has to put the most of its weight, and there where you put other uh, elements, other rhythmic elements. So my cat is calling, as you.
I heard that.
Yeah, she wants attention too.
That's okay. Studio
Uh,
cats are dope.
Yeah, so we were talking about the darbuka. Also, there are some other uh, logic samples that are uh, an Asian kit instrument, which is it can sound really cool. I'm not afraid to say that I sometimes use just built-in logic instruments.
Oh,
This is
absolutely.
yes, this gong going on. Also, another interesting library I use for ethnic percussion. It's part of Native Instrument, one of their libraries from Havio City. Creator is called Damage. Are you familiar with that library?
No, no.
Okay,
Dope.
it has very cool drum sets and sounds and percussion elements. It can be really heavy, but it can also, you can find a lot of things. It's a very useful tool. Damage.
Okay.
You have this stuff like this. Yeah, that goes very well with the darbuka, and it gives
Ah, kind of like to
very nice,
accent major
very
parts.
nice accent movement. It sounds pretty Middle Eastern.
Cool.
And stacked with them, I also use this kick drum, which sounds really soft. I mean, initially, for example, I didn't really use a kick drum in this song, but at some point, listening to the references, I thought that even if not part of any Middle Eastern style, I felt that it needed that little drive. It sounds
Sure.
like
Just,
dance.
yeah.
Can you hear that? It sounds like dance music, but if you mix it the right way, I scooped all the high ends from it, and it plays. I mean, it goes really well with what the darbuka is doing, and it helps you getting that drive and that um, travel and that movement that's
Yeah.
moving and pushing forward, which I felt that the references had, so I
Gotcha.
decided to use it.
I like how there's it's really interesting because there's a lot of space. Like it's very tasteful. Is there is space between things. Like it's not overbearing, but there's clearly a like it sounds like you're actually there in the room while they're playing. It's really authentic. Like there's a lot going on, and there's enough space where it's not derivative, where it's not like somebody trying to do it. So like you know how to really make it apply for where it's needed. Like if that makes any sense, like the usage for this song is a catalog buyer who's probably, you know, using it for various purposes. But, you know, a lot of times if it's something like world music or something, you really have to kind of play the boundaries of just how authentic it needs to be versus, like we talked about earlier, accessible. So really cool job, man, how you balance the two here. Just like seeing that process is so dope.
Yeah, thank you. And the bass, also the bass here is very Western. It's a Moog. Basically, was my Moog.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
it's a Moog, which just does.
Do
I
you
work.
have a Moog or?
Yeah. I have this Minotaur, this little
Oh,
gray.
sick. Yeah. Dude,
This,
those are, the company is literally like 2 hours from where I live in North Carolina.
yeah. Say
The
hi
factory. It's so dope.
from me. Say thank you from me.
Oh yeah, dude. When we're allowed out of the house again, man, I'll be sure to. But
Yes.
that's really cool. It basically kind of goes to show what little you need to like really make it work, as long as it's like you understand the authenticity behind it and like what's needed.
Exactly. You exactly nailed the concept. It's not really you don't have to have the high quality library. I mean, for some instruments, that's true. For example, strings, etc. But if you really understand what does the instrument, what's the meaning, the musical meaning of the instrument, what's the idiom of that instrument, once you get it, you can fake it you
Yeah.
can fake it the best way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you just nailed that, man. Like I couldn't even said it better. Well, listen, so I kind of want to wrap up with two sort of things.
Yes.
Firstly, you know, anybody who's listening, I know you have a bunch of material on Spotify. You have a bunch of stuff out. Any plugs? Like, let's get people to your channels. Let's get people reaching out. Let's make you some friends, Federico.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah,
So,
what do you got? Anything you're pushing right now?
yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram right now, where try to be really consistent in posting some of my workflow in the production I'm working right now. For example, right now I'm working on two different projects. One is the music production for an artist in Los Angeles in
Okay.
the alternative pop R&B field, and the other one is film music. It's a film project by a guy in Atlanta, which is a mystery horror movie. So once in a while, like once or twice a week, I post there some of my work for these two projects.
Oh, that's
And
great.
yeah,
So you're scoring that?
yeah, I'm scoring it.
Oh, dope, man. Awesome.
And so Instagram is a nice way
Cool.
to meet me, but also you can go to my website, which is federicoferrandina.com.
And if you don't pronounce it like that, you can't get to the site.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Spotify, of course, I have a lot of stuff on Spotify. I have some nice numbers on Spotify, but most of what I have in Spotify is library music or TV music I used to do. So whenever I have to address someone to my music I'm really proud of, I just send them to my website or to my SoundCloud page, which is soundcloud.com/Federico Ferrandina, which is my name and family name. And you can listen to most of what I did recently in the film world on trailers, music, or whatever I did recently.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up with the final question that we ask every single placement winner with that pitch. And, you know, be as detailed or as simple as you want, whatever you think would help. But if there's one thing you want independent artists, like independent producers to know around the world, what would it be? Like, advice that you would give or big lessons that you've learned. And if it's even just like eat healthy, man, that's good.
I'm gonna say something weird, probably. I don't know.
Let's go.
But yeah, don't always be spontaneous, because we are living in a strange and weird age right now where everything spontaneous seems to have a value only because it's spontaneous, and that's created some monsters, I would say, in our culture. So
kind of say not follow the trends necessarily.
Not follow the trends, and not even follow your immediate sensation. You can also follow your second thoughts that might even lead you to better results, or even go deeper into things. Because this first sensation is kind of a little
like the immediate gratification.
Yeah, it's not just about the gratification. Even when you listen to music, don't just listen once. Listen 3 times to an album to really understand what that artist wants to tell you. Because sometimes artists hide their message, their musical message, in order to give you a deeper message than the really explicit and pleasant message that you get when you like something instantly. So, I mean, this is something, I know I'm probably not that present time advisor right now.
No, this is great, man. Like a lot of people just always give business advice. So it's actually kind of refreshing to hear like actual music perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I miss some of that time, because the time that you put in listening to something and the time that you get to really put that something that you listen to into your body, into your mind, that has a value. And that value is not shorter than the immediate value that you get from something that you like right away. So this is something I would just try to make you think about, everyone that really wants to put some time. It's not a bad deal. It's not a bad investment of time.
Federico, that was amazing. I'm about to sob. That was
Thank
so
you,
nice.
Mark. Thank you. Thank you. That pitch. I'm really happy. Again, I feel lucky. I'm happy. I'll keep submitting stuff to you guys.
We're so happy to rep you, man. It's been real fun, man. So anyways, everybody listening, I'm sure is super stoked to have gone through your session.
Yeah, feel free to reach out. Any questions, anything you want to know in more details. I'm really happy to get into conversations with anyone who's just curious or whatever. Thank you.
This is a stand-up guy. Reach out to him, become his best friend. So, and it's lonely in Italy right now. Everybody's locked down, so definitely reach out.
Yeah, I need you guys. Please say something.
Yeah, we need this. We need more of that. All right, man. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mark.